Hi, Brian, and welcome to the She Built This podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to hear more about what you do. I think that most of our listeners will have no idea about this, and those that have a little bit of an idea will want a much bigger idea about this. So let's start. I already read your bio before you
Mhm.
joined. And I would love to hear a little bit more of your story, like how you really got into decoding, let's say, and interpreting people's
Yes,
faces and facial expressions.
sure. So we have to go back to when I was younger. As a kid, I grew up and I had friends, but I still felt like I didn't know how to make friends, if that makes sense. And so I call myself an introverted extrovert, meaning I love to be around people, but I was terrified of being around people at the same time. And if you're an introvert in public, it's kind of like being in the prison of your own mind, but in a public setting. And so while I was enjoying myself, I was still questioning, do I deserve to be here? What do I say to people? And I still suffer from that from time to time. So as a kid, I picked up books on body language, how to win friends and influence people, you name it. But in 2010, a friend of mine came to town and she said, let's go to dinner. I show up at the restaurant. She calls, say she's not going to make it. And I thought, oh, here we go. And she said, you need to come over to the trade show I'm at. You got to come meet this guy. And I'm like, no, I'm at the restaurant. And I was being stubborn. And she said, no, please, I'm in town I'm only going to be here the one night. I'd really like to still see you, but you need to come meet this guy. I said, well, why should I come meet him? She goes, well, he reads faces. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'm going to rush over there for that one. So I actually wasn't going to go. And she convinced me to go over there. But because this guy ruined my plans and I was just being stubborn, I was going to go prove that he was a fraud. And the reason I say fraud is out of all these books I've ever read, I'd never heard of this before. And you always hear about palm reading, but you don't never heard about face reading. So I went over there expecting that this guy was going to say generic statements, like, "Oh, you've had a hard time in life," somebody whose name starts with pick any random letter. And instead, I met this really just genuinely nice person that had a glow about him. And he sat us all down at dinner and he started dissecting everyone at the table to a T, including me. And I was hooked. I'm like, well, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not here to destroy this guy after all. Because as he was going person by person, I was listening and going, is he saying the same thing? And I was looking at their facial features to see what did we have in common when he was saying it. And was he gaslighting or was he using generic Barnum statements, which a Barnum statement can apply to anyone? But he wasn't. He was picking tactical things. And if the people had the same feature, he was repeating it to them. But if they didn't, then he changed it. So I was really, really watching this guy. And he got to me and he did it to me. And I was like, holy crap. So then I was like, okay, all right, well, there's maybe something to this. So I bought his book. I still have the book from 2010 right here. You can see my name tags on it. And to understand like what I did is I went and studied with him. And I would drive from Dallas to Fort Worth twice a month to spend 2 hours doing group study. And so like you can see my notes
Oh,
here
wow.
highlighting everything else. So I really dug into it. And as I mentioned earlier, I was an introvert. So what introverts do, we study people. And then I would go out and eventually I started testing what I was learning. It was really dicey in the beginning. Like one time I learned what perfectionist lines are, and that is if somebody has more than two lines when they squint, if they have more than two lines, they have perfectionist-like tendencies. And I was all excited. And we are at this event, and this girl squinted, and I said, ooh, is it really hard being a perfectionist? And she went to swing at me. And I was like, whoa. And so you learn very quickly, knowledge is one thing, but how you present the information is completely different. So I have a joke when I'm doing I just left a training event. I did a lunch and learn today for a corporation. And I give the example of you can say, oh, I'm a cashier, or you can say I'm a financial transaction specialist. They're both the same thing, but how you say it matters. That's really true when people feel kind of like it's almost invasive when you tell people what you do and then they ask you, like, can you analyze my face? And because people feel seen and heard for the first time in a long time, it jars people. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those skills that you have to use sparingly. And that's why the company's called subtle skills, because you don't have to tell anybody what you're doing, but when you want to, you have to tell them what you see and give them time to mentally digest it before you kind of move on. So it's all a matter of you can do it behind the scenes, just like you read a body language book and you don't walk up to everybody and go, okay, I read a body language book and stare at them.
Why are
You've
your
just
arms crossed?
exactly.
Yeah.
You've just paid attention, you read a book, and then you're putting application when you want to. And that's one of the questions I just got asked an hour ago was, well, I bet you have a hard time turning it off. I'm like, no, because I have to want to turn it on. So if you think about everything that you've ever learned, yes, if I'm a little bit ADD. So if I'm having a conversation with you and I start to get distracted, I just pick another facial feature and I'm right back to paying attention to you again.
Okay, so couple questions in this.
Mhm.
For people who don't know what it means to read faces, because you did compare it to palm reading and it's not
Yes.
that. So
Hmm.
define it for us. And
Sure.
then maybe there's like some science behind it for those. I can just hear the analytical listener saying, how
Absolutely.
could this be real?
I was one of those. So as I mentioned, I thought this has to be bull. And I don't know the language to use on your language or on your show, so we'll keep it there. And so I read up on it. So what is it based on? It's based on what's called the art is the it's called physiognomy, which is the art of understanding other people based on their facial features. Now, the crazy thing, it's not a science because it's not 100%. So the downside of things is then it becomes known as a pseudoscience because it's not 100%. But guess what? Neither is body language. So physiognomy has been around since the Greeks. It started with Aristotle. You can go back to 500 BC, and they were starting to try and understand people and their not so much their personality, but aspects of how do they take in information, how do they process information, and what facial features did they have in common. Now, here's where it gets tricky. There's 42 muscles in the face. The mind creates movement, movement creates muscle. So our faces are constantly changing all the time. So in my presentations, I show a picture of me at 18 and a picture of me at 38. And you
Hmm.
can see how different my facial features are. Well, I didn't have plastic surgery. And the simplest example is see how I have angled eyebrows now? Well, when I was a kid, I had straight eyebrows. And I'm happy to show you some of the slides from the presentation if we want to go that direction. So our faces are constantly changing. And the crazy part is we see it without knowing what we saw. So if you've ever seen somebody who's left a bad relationship in terms of romantic or business wise, and you see them later and you say, wow, you just look like you're glowing. It's because they started smiling instead of frowning. And as they started smiling more and more, your cheeks go up, your mouth goes from a downturned mouth to an upturned mouth. So our faces are constantly changing. And well, I call it decoding facial features, but face reading doesn't predict the future. It just based on what's on your face, you can see where somebody's come from and where are they today. And when I say where somebody's come from, you can see certain things like if they have deep lines here, this means one thing. If they got deep lines here, if when they raise up, so you can see I got a bunch of broken lines on my forehead. Well, somebody's got just one solid one, then that's like the Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours of study. So I see that on doctors, engineers, you name it. So it's where are you today? And there might be traces of what you've been through. And so a good example of one that sounds like a Barnum statement, but it's not, is when you squint, if somebody's got a solid line across here, it's called a burnout line. And the deeper that line is, the more traumatic of an event that they went through. Now, it doesn't tell me what the event is, but it's created by somebody just, when you're just at the end of it and I don't know what to do, and you might even be crying and you're creating these facial movements. Well, that when your parents told you as a kid, stop making that face or it'll get stuck that way, there's some truth to it. So our faces are constantly changing and evolving along with what's going on in our brain.
That's so interesting. The burnout line. I had that in high school because my friend was like an artist, and whenever she would draw my face, it would just have like this one line in the middle.
Oh, wait, now, is it a horizontal line like here or is it the squint? Oh no, so
No,
that's completely different. I can tell you what that one is.
go
That
for
is
it.
called the freight train line. So
Oh
what a
no.
freight line is somebody who has that line, once they make up their mind to do something, they go full steam ahead, just like a train, and people have one of two choices. They can either stand in front of the train and get run over, or they can get on board and try and help change tracks later on.
It's pretty accurate. My husband's listening right now. He's like, yeah.
Uh,
All right. So what are like the benefits of this for us as people in general? I mean, you talked about it kind of getting you out of that introversion
mhm.
shell, but what are some benefits? And then like how do you use it as a business owner?
So it's a business skill that has a life application as well. So the first part in business, what do we all buy from people we know, like, and trust. Well, so when you can learn to understand other people, what you do is you start putting yourself in their shoes and you figure out, like, I'm an extremely visual person. But if I'm talking to somebody who has larger ears and smaller eyes, then they're an auditory person. So I have to learn to change my language to occasionally use theirs as well. So the example I
Mm,
give is when I was a younger kid and I traveled internationally, I thought everyone should speak English. And if they don't, I'll speak English louder. Well, that doesn't help. But if you try and learn to speak someone else's language, they try to help you speak theirs. And it's the exact same thing. So if I'm a visual person, like I will literally hang up the phone and say, okay, I'll see you later because I'm so visual. Well, if I'm talking to somebody that I know is auditory, I have to do things that an auditory person is. So instead of texting them what I want, I have to tell them what I want. Or I have to ask questions like, hey, do you hear where I'm coming from? Or does this sound like a good idea? Instead of saying, do you see what I'm trying to do? So it's learning to speak someone else's language. And the crazy part about it is, number one, when you're focused on someone and you're giving them your time and attention, it's so rare this day and age that people automatically pay attention back. Now, I
yeah.
can give you just the simple example because, people will see this. Now, imagine if I did the Zoom the entire time and I'm like, yeah, no, no, I'm still listening. Uh-huh. But we do it in real life all the time. And that's why I tell people it drives me nuts. Some people will have their camera here and they'll have a Zoom conversation like this, which is great because they're looking at their monitor, but they're not paying attention to where the camera is. Well, you don't feel like they're talking to you versus if I do this. So it just creates that it's not a way to manipulate, it's a way to try and create like rapport with people
Yep.
because you're making it about you and what you demand. So I mention this all the time. We know when a salesperson is pushing their product on you, and what do we call it? Commission breath. But we don't pay that same attention when we're talking about something in our personal life. If we keep pushing people towards something only we want and they don't want it, that's commission breath, but in our personal life. But instead, if you really want to build rapport with people, even people you've known for years, you figure out what do we have in common and what's different and how do we work on those differences.
Yeah, it's really a connection tool, which I love. And it makes it seem because I could hear somebody thinking that this seems like, oh, that's malicious, or you're
Yes.
using it to sell somebody something, but it really is about meeting them where they're at. So I love
Yes.
that. Do you think we can break down some of maybe the major ones or the ones that people find most interesting or most exciting from
Sure.
like eyes to ears to nose to whatever you think? Like I'll let you control that, but
I love to teach eyebrows. And the reason for that is because eyebrows lead to eye contact. So even if you're an introvert, if you're staring here, you get credit as if you're staring here. So that's why a lot of people go, oh, he's the eyebrow guy. I teach a lot more than that, but that's the thing that people can walk away immediately and understand. But let me give you a little bit of background before we jump into it. We're all amateur face readers. And the reason for that is think about growing up. Every book you ever read in school that was required reading didn't have pictures. So authors and artists used to take courses in physiognomy, just like attorneys, to learn how to do character development for the various characters they had in their books.
Mhm.
So that's why they would talk about, well, John Smith with his downturned nose and his pointed chin or whatever feature they wanted, or, the hero, Steve with his chiseled jaw and his large chin. So we've been taught to a degree how to understand people. Then look at every fairy tale book, every
I
comic
was
book,
just thinking
every
that.
Disney movie. Can you turn it on and tell me who's the hero and who's the villain just based on their looks?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the food critic in Ratatouille. He popped
Yeah.
into my mind and that face, like you just know he is he has something inside him that's a little spark, but he is nasty.
Yes, and people get it confused all the time. And so there's several things. There was something called eugenics that was misused during the World War II by a certain country. And then there was phrenology, which was the attempt that said if you have a bump here on your head, then that determines you're a criminal or you're this or you're that. And those were about trying to not understand people, but how to label people. And there was a lot
Mhm.
of racist things that were associated with that. With, oh, if you come from this race, well, then you have that. And that's not what face reading is because everybody from every race can have a small lip, a large nose, a small nose, large eyes, small eyes. It's all in proportion to the person you're talking to, not into anybody else. And the cool thing about it is, all I'm trying to figure out is how should I talk to you? How do you take in information? How do you process information? So people ask all the time, can you tell me who's a liar and a cheater? No, because that's more about statement analysis, micro expressions, body language. This is just trying to learn how to build a bond with someone.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I need this for all my copywriting clients because I'm like, how could I communicate to them?
Oh, oh, you want a simple one for that? Oh, this is easy.
Sure.
So for copywriting, you have to be able to speak three different languages. You have to put in visual terms, auditory terms, and kinesthetic terms, because those are the three modalities that most people learn. Now, we do have more ways of taking the world. You've got olfactory and then you've got taste. But most people are either hands-on learners, they're visual learners, or they listen to instructions. So when you're talking to people and in your copy, you need to put in things like, if this sounds like it's the right product for you, if you can't wait to see the look on other people's faces when they see you roll up. So what I say, see twice. So I use the visual. And then you can say things when you're ready to pull the trigger and hit the ground running. Those are kinesthetic action
Hmm.
movements. So if you use all three of those in it, you're speaking to everybody that reads your copy. If I was to write my own copy and I said, wait till you see this product. Oh, once you get it going and you see where it's going to take you and you picture where it's going to go, I'm using all visual words. So now I just alienated 2/3 of the audience.
Yeah, we must naturally tend towards, and I think a lot of people that create their own content, you must naturally tend towards what yours is, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I use a lot of C for sure.
So do I. I tell people all the time, I hang up the phone. I'm like, okay, I'll see you later because I'm visual. And it's just the way I'm wired. So in a past relationship, if she was going to the store, she was very auditory. I'm visual. So if she was going to the store, I had to tell her. She'd get so mad when I would text her what I wanted. But when I was going to the store, if she told me, I'm coming back with like two of the right things and five of the wrong things. So we came up with a system that was depending on who's going to the store determines how the other person is sharing what they want from the store. So if I'm going, you better text me because I will kind of remember if I picture things in my head, but if I didn't, ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. Oh, funny. I need like a handwritten list. Like I can't, if it's on my phone, I forget things. That's so interesting. Okay. So we started with eyebrows. Tell
Yes.
us what there is information wise in the eyebrows.
Sure.
Also, what about people that like pluck them? I mean,
You're still
I,
choosing. Yeah. Oh, that's okay. So let's go high level, then we'll jump into
yeah,
eyebrow.
yeah, yeah.
Makeup. You spend an hour putting it on, but it's to tell the world what parts of your face you want to be seen. So if you want to go with a very simple analogy, when my daughter turned 4, yeah, 4, we had a face painter at her birthday party. And so what happened? She chose to be a tiger. And as she ran around, people go, oh no, a tiger. And she'd run around and go, rah. What it was is it was just paint on the face to tell other people how to treat her. Makeup is no
Mm,
different. So as a
interesting.
woman, you can choose. Do you want to highlight your lips? Do you want to highlight your eyelids? Do you want your cheeks to look wider with rouge? So women have that ability to say, this is what I want you to pay attention to. So that's why even older women, like let's say in their 70s and 80s, they may have a flat lip, but with lipstick, they draw on larger lips than they actually have. Somebody taught them to do that. And so now we go to plastic surgery. The number one plastic surgery in the US is lip enhancement. And we can talk about that in a minute, but well, let's just talk about it now. So when we say the phrase, because we talk about faces all the time, keep a stiff upper lip, it means be very stoic. Don't show
Hmm.
emotions. So if you have a flatter upper lip, subconsciously we know don't ask you a lot of personal questions. However, fuller lip people, this is the personal lip on top, this is the professional lip down below. So if you have a fuller upper lip, you seem more approachable. That's why when you ever see the big, sexy red lips, they're not thin lip and then a big lower lip. It's always a large upper lip and a large lower lip.
Yeah, that is so true.
And we talked about it, right? Keep a stiff upper lip. But that one just popped to mind while we were talking.
So I like the makeup example, and I think I understand what you mean. Like we can make people kind of feel a certain thing even by how we're applying our makeup about ourselves, about us. Yeah, not just oh they look better, but like subtly on a with our cheeks and our eyebrows and stuff.
Yeah, it's what do you want to highlight? So you have an entire face, but you don't, you'll pay more attention to one area or make it stand out. So for example, if you're going out and you want a lot of attention, red lipstick or lipsticks that has sparkles on it, saying pay attention to my words in my mouth. If
Mm,
you make your cheeks look wider, you can do that with rouge. You can make your eyelids look fuller by putting what do you put on that on upper eyelids? Uh,
eyeshadow.
eyeshadow. There you
Yeah, I don't use very much
go.
eyeshadow.
But yet you've got very large lids, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So it's funny because women have an advantage in this to a degree. You just didn't know why you were doing it. And now you'll forever think like, okay, so I spent an hour in front of a mirror to tell people how to treat me for the rest of the day.
That is so interesting. In some of our defense, it's not quite an hour.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
to
And I'm
let
just
the
throwing
record
it out there.
stand
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah. But it's true. So like think about if you had to go out, you don't have to have your face completely done, but is there something feature wise that you personally always like, I won't leave the house without this particular piece of makeup?
Well, I do have thin lips, and so I
Uh-huh.
think I always try to add a little bit of color because I'm like, otherwise they just blend into the rest of
See,
my
there you
face.
go. You're proving my point for me.
Yeah, yeah.
But now that we've talked about that with makeup and plastic surgery, let's go back to what you asked about, which was eyebrows. So we talk about faces all the time. So do you like comedy movies?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. So there's two types of comedy. There's highbrow humor and lowbrow humor. Now, that term alone was misused in some other studies, but in physiognomy or face reading, highbrow humor is when somebody tells you a joke and it takes you a minute to get the joke and then you laugh. Lowbrow humor is Jackass and Three Stooges. So it's
Okay.
immediate humor. So when you meet people that have high eyebrows, and you imagine, and because you have this, if you imagine data racing down your forehead to get into your eye, well, with your eyebrows up here, it can only go so fast, has to go over the speed bump and then try to speed up again. So when somebody has higher eyebrows, they need more time to make a decision. But if somebody's eyebrows are closer to their eye, then it's like that same data can race down your forehead very fast and only has to slow down right before it goes in. So you can literally look at someone and go, like yourself, you have higher eyebrows. So I know if I force you to make a quick decision, you're going to have buyer's remorse and either have a deal or you'll never refer me to anyone else. So I know it may not be a one call close. I'm going to give you the information. I'm going to give you time to digest the information before I'm going to press you for anything.
Literally, I have a list of things that I'm going to purchase. They could be as simple as like a book, and it will stay on that list for a month until I'm ready to buy it.
Mine are a little bit higher too, so I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but on the opposite side of the scale, if you see someone that has eyelids very close to their eye and you've got 30 minutes on their calendar, get to the point in five
Yeah.
minutes and ask them questions.
That I wish I knew this like 2 hours ago, Brian. I could have sealed the deal. All
Yes.
right. I love that. That is fascinating. So then another one I read in your email this morning was about the slant of someone's eyebrows or like the angles
Yes.
of somebody's
Yes.
eyebrows. So like straight versus angular.
So when we talk about the right way to say it, some people get offended if you say slant. So if I say the angle of their eyes. So the easy way to think about this is, let me grab a business card here. Oh, actually, I'll use this. So if you take from the inside of somebody's eye to the outside, then if it angles up, they want to hear about the upside of things. So you need to talk about the features and benefits of the product. If their eyes angle down, then it could be what are the potential downsides that they're concerned about that you need to address. So if you kind of know my bio, but for your listeners, I used to sell technology to correctional officials, so jails and prisons, very, very stoic people whose body language was often sitting with their arms crossed the entire time. But what I looked at is that's fine, that's what keeps you safe in that environment. But if their eyes angled up, then I need to talk about why our product is the best. These are the features and benefits that make it stand out. If their eyes angled down, then I talk about what did we learn from past mistakes that helped us improve the product to make it what it is. So then I'm still selling the one product. But if I start with the failures we had that make this a better product, I'm answering the people whose eyes angle down because they're worried about the downside of things. And if I'm talking about the features and benefits, then I'm talking to people whose eyes angle up. So when you can see that on someone, and it's pretty easy to see from across the room, then when you're talking about those things, you make eye contact with them to let them know, hey, I'm speaking your language right now.
Oh,
And it makes a
yeah.
difference.
Wow. So I mean, when you're in a group of people, does this feel like it gets overwhelming? Also, do like two features ever like kind of do you have to do any like mental gymnastics when you see two features that maybe conflict with one another? Does that ever even happen?
Oh, no, it does. But here's where and I try not to teach this until people have gotten the basics down, but you asked the question. So there's actually two sides of our face. There's a personal side and a professional side. An easy way to remember it is you said your husband earlier. So if I say, hey, are you married? It's a personal question. Where's your wedding ring? Which hand is it on?
Well, it's actually not on
Left.
right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna busted. No, I'm kidding. So it's always on the left hand in the US. So if I ask you, are you married? It's a personal question. This is always the personal side. Another way to remember is personal ends in L.
Yep.
So you can say this is the personal side. Doesn't matter right-handed, left-handed, what gender, where they're born. It's always this is the personal side, and this is always the professional side. So the question is, when you're selling somebody something, which side of their face are you talking to? Is it a right brain or left brain decision? So if you're selling somebody, let's say a car, well, that's going to be a personal decision. So I'm going to look for what features are on this side of the face, the left side of the face. If I'm selling them something for their company or business, then I'm going to look on what the features on the right side of their face. Now, with that being said, a lot of people are symmetrical. So for example, you have rounded eyebrows on both of your eyebrows, but somebody can have a straight eyebrow on one side and an angled eyebrow on the other. And so then you start looking, or I can show you pictures. And well, actually, you know what? Hold on. So you can see because you're a visual learner. Whoops, let me get out of this PowerPoint. And if I can share the screen,
Oh, yes.
then what
And
I will do is I will give,
for the listeners, I'm going to have this on YouTube for this specific episode. So hold on. I'm trying to figure out how to share my
yeah,
screen and talk. Not my best skill.
that's fine. You may have to make me co-host or the
Oh,
host, and I'll give
you're all
permission.
set. Yeah, you
Good.
should be able to do it now.
You have to tell me how to do that because people don't get it a lot. So um, let me go here. All right. So you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right, so I'll show you a few things. We'll keep it very, very simple. So this is what it's based on, which is called physiognomy, and that is how to understand other people based on their facial features. So there's 42 muscles in the face, and the mind creates movement, movement creates muscle. And so that's how things can change over time. So what I mentioned earlier is that this example of me at 18 versus 38. So
Oh,
what you'll
wow.
notice the difference between the two pictures are my ears used to stick out farther away from my head. Now it's harder to see in this one, but this little line right here is called a heart line. So if anybody has it like backslash on their earlobe, that's a sign of potential cardiovascular health issues. So somebody needs to keep their cardiovascular in check. Look at, I used to have straight eyebrows on both sides, and now I have angled eyebrows on both sides. And this will make more sense when we cover eyebrows in a minute. But when I was talking about eye angles, look how much down my eyes as a kid were. And that's because I was raised in a very loving household. But my parents like, hey, go for it. But what's your backup plan if it doesn't work out? Or what if
Hmm.
this doesn't work out? So having downward angled eyes doesn't make you a negative Nancy. It's kind of like preparation. Hey, have you thought about this? So people in QA are great if they worry about the downside of things. And what made me successful ultimately also worked against me in some areas because I was always thinking, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And in the corporate environment, people don't like you to question when they think that they have a brilliant idea. So it can work against you at the exact same time. But this is just an example of how much faces can change over time. And so what we were talking about earlier is, did you mention, well, we mentioned Chris Voss, but I recommend these three books to pretty much everybody. So the first book is You Say More Than You Think by Janine Driver. That is, what does my body language say about me? How am I sitting? How am I standing? What am I doing with my hands? The other book, What Everybody is Saying by Joe Navarro, is a very picturesque about how do I understand and read your body language. And then Never Split the Difference. We already talked about it before the show started. Big fans of Chris Voss. Everyone should read that for understanding negotiations, business, and other things. The interesting fact about all three of these people is they were trained by government agencies. So Janine, the book in yellow, was a former ATF agent who wasn't allowed to carry a gun. So she relied on her situational awareness and body language knowledge to keep her safe in very
Wow.
dangerous environments. Joe Navarro was a former FBI agent who was used body language for interrogations, investigations, things of that nature. And then Chris Voss was the hostage negotiator for the FBI. So all three of these people were government trained and they stood out in their field. So I think everyone should read all three of these books.
I'll make sure all of those are in the show notes. And
Sure.
I screenshotted so I would not
Oh,
forget.
perfect. Well, it's easy for everybody here, and we'll pop up my QR code at the end. If you go to getthecheatsheet.com, I have a list to how to get the cheat sheet. And then I also, all the books I talk about in my talks, I put in there as well.
Perfect.
So we mentioned this earlier, but here you may see a few judges. What I see are four people that have large ears and small eyes. So it makes perfect reason to me on
Wow.
the voice because what's the voice is it's when a judge doesn't get to see the person, but they hear them. And if they like what they hear, then they turn around to see what they look like. And people go, oh, well, that's just one season of the show. Okay, grab another season. What do they have? Large ears and small eyes.
Wow, that is fascinating.
Uh-huh. And now watch this. Go to artists. What do you see on them? Now we can't always see their ears, but do they all have large eyes? So these are all artists over time. So even Edgar Allan Poe, I'm sorry, these are authors and artists. So Edgar Allan Poe here, visual, this guy didn't even care. He cut off one of his own ears. That's the difference in when you start looking at people who have large eyes versus large ears. So musicians, well, they're auditory people, so it makes sense that they go into and love music, play music, things of that nature. So when we talk about eyebrows, so this is what happens when you Google people without eyebrows.
Okay, that's frightening. I highly recommend this Google search, everyone.
Yes. Now, because I always tell people, sorry for the mental trauma, so I make up for it with this one, which is
Oh
people who
no.
draw eyebrows on babies.
Oh
Yeah.
God.
So that's the funny thing is, look, the babies are all the same, but we look at eyebrows to understand people.
Yeah, we really do.
Uh-huh. So what you see is what for the people who are listening, there's babies laughing, but when they put really angled eyebrows on them, they look like an evil laugh instead of a smiling, happy baby. And so when we start looking at people, you just take away one feature, which is eyebrows, and we don't know how to talk to someone. So there's another book called The Like Switch by an FBI agent. And they talk about as a species, when someone would enter our tribe, we would immediately look at their eyebrows and go, do they raise it up like to be happy and smile at us, or do they squint down and that's a foe? So we would look at eyebrows first, and then we look at their hands. So if you want to meet somebody and you walk into a room, you just do the eyebrow flash, turn your head and smile. But if you have ill intent, you squint because you're kind of seeing what's going on. You're taking in the environment, then you're a potential foe.
That's how
And
I walk through the grocery store,
there,
squinting.
I just,
Don't talk to me.
well, then you're doing it right. As a younger, before I got PRK done, I didn't realize I really needed glasses. Like I was one of those I could read enough, but I didn't realize I was squinting. And people would be like, "Why are you so angry?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm actually a pretty jovial guy," but I realized I was squinting, and that subconsciously sends the wrong signal to people. So when people talk about RBF, or sorry for the cuss word, resting bitch face, sometimes that's just squinting. And so I was talking to somebody the other day that when they squint, they have perfectionist lines, which is more than two lines between the eyebrows. And they said, I don't understand why people always think I'm unapproachable. I'm like, well, because subconsciously we know these are the perfectionist lines, and people think that you're going to expect that perfection. So there is no one singular facial feature. It's a combination of things. Just like creating a recipe or creating a drink, it's the mixing of things together that we all subconsciously read and kind of put together our own filtering. Now, here's a crazy part we didn't talk about earlier. Face reading was actually taught in the academic system until Henry VIII said that he didn't like the idea that beggars and vagabonds could misuse this skill, and he had it yanked out of the educational system. So it's still taught to authors, attorneys, and artists for the reasons we talked about before. So attorneys, I met my mentor, Mac. He learned it for jury consulting. And he ended up learning so much about people, and he loved it that he walked away from his law practice to teach this around the world. I was lucky enough to meet him in 2010. I used it for personal gain. So when I met him, I think I was on the help desk. I might have been moving to sales engineer, but it helped me go to regional vice president of sales with a $40 million book of business. And a majority of it was using a combination of body language and then decoding faces and trying to build rapport, because that's what I had. That's the way that I had to learn to kind of understand other people.
So
Um,
when you're in a group, what do you, Brian, what do you I know you speak to a lot of groups, large and small. So what do
mhm.
you kind of focus on to center yourself?
Eyebrow height and then eyebrow shape. So kind of we talked here. When I first got started, I was a horrible speaker. You can appreciate this. Uh, Not you personally, but I couldn't have glasses of water because when I would first talk, like water would splash all over. So I learned to drink out of bottles when I first got started. But what I would look for is people with rounded eyebrows. And that's because people with rounded eyebrows want to take care of the people around them. So they're always thinking about other people first, friends, family, coworkers. And I noticed people with rounded eyebrows were like cheering me on, nodding and smiling when I was on stage. So when I was first looking for, when you get started as a speaker, you're looking for affirmation and validation. Once you understand that you have your message down, you're looking for someone, just one person to help in the audience. But when you first start, you're looking for that reassurance. And so I would always look for rounded eyebrow people because they were giving that. And so an easy way to look at people, and we'll go back through these, are rounded eyebrow people. Think about the people around them. And this is where your listeners are going to really either agree or want to start a fight. Look at Elon Musk and Oprah. So Elon, after selling out of PayPal, reinvested $75 million into Tesla. And what's Tesla? It wasn't about him. It was about helping create cars that he could take his 5 kids around. And then they took money out of that and created SpaceX. So a lot of what he invests his money in is helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that he's still not proud of himself, but you have to look where people invest their money as to what they do. With Oprah, we all watched the Oprah show, but it wasn't because we want to know more about Oprah. We watched her because of who she interviewed and what she did for her audiences, right? So, like, I had somebody argue with me. Oh, yeah, well, those audiences had to pay taxes on the car. So you got a $40,000 car and you're upset that you had to pay taxes on it. I mean, it's just there's no winning with some people. But so when you see somebody like yourself with rounded eyebrows, you put other people first and yourself second. So if I'm talking to you and I want to make it all about Emily, that's not the way to do it because that's not the way you think. I know I would talk about your friends, your family, your coworkers first, and then how you benefit second. So
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, oh, this would be great to help my customers. You didn't say, oh, this would be great to help me. You literally
Well,
said,
helping them does eventually help me.
yeah, I
It's a
know,
win.
but
It's a
that's
win-win.
it. Eventually it helps you, but your first response is, oh, if I get this, then I can teach it to other people. Now, you would say that if you were like me, because I have angled eyebrows. So angled eyebrows are help me understand what's my angle, so then I can help other people. So it would, if you had said, and you'd have to have angled eyebrows to say this, if you'd say, oh, I can't wait to learn this to teach it to my people, that's what somebody like me with angled eyebrows thinks. So see, I have angled eyebrows on both
Yeah.
sides. But remember, as a kid, they were straight. So that's, I would actually say it that way is, I can't wait to learn this so I can teach it to others. So it's, you one's eyebrows tell you how to talk to people. And then the third eyebrow is straight eyebrows are straight to the point people, facts, figures, data. So if you do just those, do they make decisions fast or slow? Right. Sorry, I did that backwards. Slow is up high, fast is down low. Then you start thinking, how do they think? How do I present the same product, but based on what their eyebrows say? So straight
Wow.
eyebrows, straight to the point, angled eyebrows, what's their angle? Rounded eyebrows help the people around them, or think of the people around them first and themselves second.
Okay, that is an easy start. So we can just basically look at people's eyebrows and get a
Yes.
lot of information. And you must know about, like, I saw in your book you had drawings of like every area of the face. So
Yeah, there's 250 different features and or combinations that are there, but there's things I don't focus on. For example, so my mentor and there's some groups I'm still in where we get together and we kind of people who teach it or people who just use it in their life, we still hop on Zooms and talk about it. They love to talk about ears. I skip ears. I just look at our ears large or small, but there's whole things about like what does the inner ear ridge of your ear look like and all this. I skip it. Why? Because like if I'm talking to you right now, does it help me? No, I can't see either one of your ears. So what
right.
I teach in the basics class, and I'm actually in the process of writing a book right now calling Decoding the Faces, the Basics of Face Reading, or sorry, Decoding the Face, Basics of Face Reading, because then I'm gonna have intermediate and then advanced. But ears aren't going to be in mine until probably advanced because 50% of the population has them hidden. So why would I make that a focus point in the
Right.
beginner's book? Now, I do talk about ear height makes a difference. So is it high ears or low ears? And then size of ears is important. But getting much beyond that means instead of talking to you, I'm gonna have to stand and look at your ear,
Right.
and that'd be really creepy.
Can you
Uh,
turn to the side for me?
yes, exactly. Hey, look at that. What's that? And then
Exactly.
so that's why some of the features I ignore until you really spend time around people. So what I teach in the courses and the basics are if you get a picture of someone on LinkedIn, Google, Instagram, Facebook, what you typically see is like what you and I are talking right now. So what features are visible? You can sometimes see the shape of someone's forehead, but you can definitely see their eyebrow. You can definitely see their eyelid. You can see the eye angle. You can see their ridge of their nose. You can see their nostrils, not up their nose, but their nostrils there. You can see how high or wide their cheeks are, what kind of lips do they have, how large or small is their mouth, what does their chin look like, what does their jaw look like. That's just on the features themselves. Now, in between that, you can also see the lines across their forehead, lines down here if they're squinting. Are there lines like I have right here? Are there lines coming off their mouth? Is there a line here when they smile? Is there a line here? So we talked about, is it manipulation? If you believe that the book, The Five Love Languages, is manipulation, then yes, this is manipulation. But what that book is about is learning to understand that not everybody's like you. So how do you make them feel loved and seen and heard? That's exactly what this is.
And we just before you had a podcast episode on the five love languages. So
There you
that
go.
was a great tie-in. Okay, here's a question which I wasn't planning on asking, but it popped into my head. Because you were talking about those LinkedIn profiles.
Mhm.
My friend shared a photo with me the other day that was like an AI generated headshot. And
Yeah,
those AI generated headshots are genuinely not the person that they're
correct.
showing that they are. So
Yes.
I'm not talking about like, could we read that? Because probably you could, but it wouldn't be an accurate read on the person you're meeting. I want to
Mhm.
know your thoughts on whether or not you'd say use an AI headshot or don't use an AI headshot and kind of what your, yeah.
I think don't use them for your actual LinkedIn or for other things. If you want to throw one in to say, hey, look, this is what AI generated for me, people pick up on things that are inaccurate, or you hear the big buzzword is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
The minute you find out that somebody's not even showing a picture of them, you devalue them to a degree in your mind. Now, if it's fun, you say, hey, look what AI created, and you're showing them what it was and what you'd look like. Like there's a popular one now. What if you were born in the 1950s? I think is one of the ones I've been seeing on Instagram. If you're doing it for fun, yes. But the minute people question, why are you doing that? Now, and there are examples that people, what does Apple have right now? And I don't know if you're an Android or an Apple person, but it has, do you want to use the yellow smiley face or do you want to use your avatar smiling?
Oy
I
vey.
just tend not to use those, right? But it's up to personal preference. But I do think if you're trying to build authenticity and you want to have a following and everything, you either have to call out and go and let people know, hey, this is my AI. But if you're just putting it out there and then it's not you, if people ever meet you, you've blown credibility to a degree. Make sense?
Total sense. And I was going to hope that that's what you said because I echo those thoughts. All right, last sort of question. How does kind of like somebody's overall body language play a role, or do you not even focus on that whatsoever?
I mentioned Janine Driver, the former ATF agent, the book in the yellow. Her and I actually have a course called Read the Face, Read the Room. So what I love about decoding facial features is, or face reading, whatever you want to call it, is that's how you proactively prepare, or the minute you meet someone, you start thinking, how can I think from their perspective and not just mine? But then once you have that, that's when body language comes into play. So for anybody who hasn't really studied body language, the big misconception is crossed arms is a bad thing. Some people are comfortable that way. Some people's back hurts. Some people are cold. What you're looking for is when there's what there's called the baseline, and then there's drastic changes. So if you and I are talking on the podcast and I suddenly go, uh-huh, yeah, that's something to pay attention to. But if while we're talking, I lean forward on my desk and I'm leaning forward to cross my arms, that's not a bad thing. I have stand-up desk, so for me, if I want to stay standing, well, then maybe I'm going to lean on the desk and cross my arms at the same time. So it's just all dependent on the situation. That's where body language and micro expressions are good, is those are reactive skills to pay attention to. So learning those skills is vastly important. That's why I recommend those three books in addition to
Yeah.
what I teach, because face reading, I'm a total nerd and I have this in my PowerPoint, but I'll go ahead and show it to you. So I always have like Batman stuff out there. Okay. And the whole thing was Batman wasn't born with a superpower. He learned skills that he then uses, right? And what does he always have? He's got stuff in his utility belt. That's the way I look at all these skills. So body language, statement analysis, how to win friends and influence people, how to decode facial features, all just help you become a well-rounded person to learn to build rapport with people in different ways. So I think they're all valuable. This one just happens to be the one that called to me because being an introvert, I love the idea that I could proactively look people up ahead of time and kind of go, okay, well, what do I need to change about the way I think versus how they are?
Yeah, super. You know what? We didn't even touch on that, but like, I love that getting your finger on, getting a read on them before you even sit down with them. It's
100%.
helpful because, like, for somebody like me, like, I need to kind of pre-process, and
Yep,
so I like that. Okay, I want to learn more, and I know that other people listening want to learn more too, and like find out what other resources you have. So I
sure.
looked at your website and I know you have quite a few, like from
Mhm.
card decks to you said you're writing a book, which is exciting. So
Correct.
talk us through some of your favorite resources to share, and I'll make sure links are in those show notes.
Absolutely. And I'll pop up real fast too. I have a QR code that I'll pop up. I think the flashcards are my favorite. And the reason for that is because I bought books, but books can overwhelm you. When you turn on 2 pages, and you saw when I showed you the book was advantageous because I had one-on-one coaching, well, group coaching, but I was able to sit with my mentor and go, okay, explain this, explain that. To me, the flashcards are the best way to go, is because when you see the flashcards, and let me just pop this up real fast. Sorry. When you see the flashcards, you can immediately look at something and go, oh, okay, I get it. And that's not something that you have the capability to do with the book, and it leads to overwhelm. I give out free resources on my Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. So if you just follow Subtle Skills pretty much anywhere, and I'll pop that up real fast. So if you see, go to Subtle Skills, that's where I put everything.
Okay,
And
great. And you
yeah,
forgot your LinkedIn, but you also, I'm going to also include that because you also do a great job on your LinkedIn. Like you're right. You give a lot of free tips and resources
yes.
on there. So,
Well, and I'll tell you, do you know why I didn't put LinkedIn on there? LinkedIn I used to hide from because I had imposter syndrome, and it was easy to do things as subtle skills. And it's a kind of a fail on personal branding in the long run, because people want to know about a company, but they want to know about you. And
yeah.
so I thought, oh, well, if I do everything as subtle skills, I can record videos, I can do all these things, and it's not going to taint my name. And that was a mistake, because I will tell you this, not everybody is going to support you, but a lot more people will support you than you think when you tell people what you're interested in and what you do. Um, the scariest thing I ever did was hitting click to post on my personal page about being a speaker. Even though I'd already been doing it, I was being paid to be on stages. I'd gone through this. I worried about being judged by people. And there are people who will absolutely talk trash, but more people have reached out and said, hey, do you want to come do this with me? How can I support you? What can I do? So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because the people who weren't going to support you never were anyway. So why not find people who want to help you and support you and give them the ability to, because it may inspire someone else to share what they want to do later on.
I agree. People listening are like, Emily says these things all the time because this is like my soapbox. So,
Yes.
Brian, this was so wonderful, and I know that there's so much to learn, but I just want to thank you for like being so generous with your time and your information and helping feed a little bit more of my curiosity in this area.
Thank you for reaching out. This is the thing. Look, had my mentor hoarded knowledge, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that's the whole thing, is this is about spreading information, trying to help people build rapport, because as much as I love these devices, they connect us to the world, but they disconnect us from each other. So any
Yeah.
way we can work on rebuilding face-to-face contact is worth the time and effort and study.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.